bowed on the open water, far beyond the glow of harbor lights and the comfort of land. The ocean becomes something else entirely, a vast, breathing darkness that swallows sound, direction, and certainty. And this is where the true stories begin. Not in myths or movies, but in the whispered accounts of fishermen who went out expecting an ordinary night and returned forever changed, or never returned at all. And as the screen fades in with slow, drifting shots of moonlit waves and distant navigation lights blinking like dying stars, a quiet voice settles in and asks, "Have you ever been so far from shore that the ocean felt alive around you?" Because this is not just a video, it's a descent into real fear, the kind that creeps into your bones when you realize help is ours away and the sea does not care if you survive. Fishermen have always understood the romance of the deep, the promise of a good catch, the peace of isolation. But they also know the unspoken rule that the ocean takes more than it gives. And in this first chapter, we begin with the moment everything shifts, when routine turns to dread, when the calm surface hides something profoundly wrong beneath it. Like the account of a veteran trawler captain who had worked the same stretch of water for over 20 years without incident, until one night, miles offshore, his sonar began marking something impossibly large moving beneath his boat. Not fast, not aggressive, just pacing him, matching his speed no matter how he adjusted course. And when he leaned over the rail, scanning the black water with his deck light, he felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched from below. A pressure so intense it made his chest tighten. And though nothing broke the surface, the boat shuddered as if something brushed against it. Not a wave, not debris, but something deliberate, something aware. Stories like this are often dismissed as nerves or imagination, but the fear is consistent across cultures and coastlines. From small wooden fishing boats in Southeast Asia to industrial trawlers in the North Atlantic, fishermen speak of strange knocks against hulls, low vibrations that travel through the deck into their boots, and sudden dead silence where even the waves seem to pause, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath. And it's during these moments that panic sets in, because the mind understands storms and mechanical failure, but it cannot easily rationalize an unseen presence in the water. Something large enough to move a vessel, yet intelligent enough to remain hidden. One fisherman described cutting his engine to listen for damage, only to hear something else instead, a slow, rhythmic sound echoing through the hull, like pressure changes deep underwater. A sound no manual could explain. And as minutes stretched into an eternity, his radio crackled to life, not with a voice, but with static so intense it drowned out everything else, forcing him to kill the power entirely, leaving him floating in total darkness with nothing but the sound of water against steel and the creeping certainty that he was not alone. These encounters don't announce themselves with dramatic visuals. They unfold quietly, psychologically, turning the ocean into a living void where fear feeds on isolation. And as part one unfolds, we move through these real accounts with care and restraint, focusing not on monsters, but on the raw human reaction to the unknown. The shaking hands, the desperate calculations, the way grown men with decades of experience suddenly feel as vulnerable as children. And as the narration deepens, the video reminds viewers that over 80% of the ocean remains unexplored, that our technology fades quickly in deep water, and that fishermen, more than anyone, operate at the edge of what we understand. Where legends begin as survival stories whispered over radios and docks at dawn. Before this chapter closes, we linger on a final account: a small fishing crew who felt their nets pulled tight with impossible force. Not snapping, not tearing, but dragging the boat backward against the engine, until the captain made the only choice he could and cut the line. Watching thousands of dollars of equipment vanish into the darkness, and as the tension releases and the boat steadies, the question remains hanging in the air, unanswered and unsettling. What was strong enough to take it? And with that lingering doubt, the narrator gently draws the audience in closer, inviting them to stay, reminding them that this is only the beginning. Because in the next part, the ocean reveals something even worse than unseen forces: ships that shouldn't exist, voices that shouldn't answer, and harbors that appear where no land should be. Before ending with a calm but ominous channel outro. If you're drawn to true stories of real terror, fear born from reality and not fiction, subscribe to True Terror Files Official and stay with us. Because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. Out on the ocean, fear doesn't always come from what crashes into your hull or pulls at your net. Sometimes it comes from what appears perfectly still, impossibly quiet, and utterly wrong. And this is where the stories turn colder, where seasoned fishermen admit that the most terrifying nights weren't storms or mechanical failures, but encounters with vessels that should not have been there at all. Because across generations and coastlines, there are consistent accounts of phantom ships emerging from fog banks, drifting silently with no running lights, no visible crew, and no response to radio calls. Like the trawler crew off the North Atlantic, who spotted an old-style fishing boat ahead of them just before midnight. Its silhouette outlined faintly by moonlight, looking outdated even by fishing standards, with rusted rails and a mast design no longer used, and as protocol demanded, they hailed it over the radio, expecting static or silence, but instead received a weak, distorted transmission that sounded like breathing layered beneath broken words, a voice attempting to speak but never forming language. And when they tried to adjust frequency, the signal vanished, and so did the boat itself, fading into the fog without wake, without sound, without explanation. These aren't isolated incidents, because fishermen in the Pacific tell similar stories of radar contacts that appear suddenly at close range, triggering collision alarms, forcing evasive maneuvers, only for the object to disappear the moment visual contact should be possible, leaving crews shaken, second-guessing their equipment, their sanity, and the reliability of their instruments. And perhaps the most unsettling accounts come from distress calls that appear on emergency channels late at night, voices requesting help from coordinates that lead nowhere, coordinates that sometimes place the caller in waters hundreds of miles from known shipping routes, or worse, over depths no vessel could safely occupy. And when Coast Guards investigate, they find nothing. No wreckage, no signal, no record of any registered ship in that area, just silence. And the fishermen who hear these calls are left haunted by the sound of panic echoing through their radios, knowing someone or something was asking for help and never received it. One fisherman recalled hearing a mayday call so clear it stopped his entire crew mid-task, a calm voice repeating the same phrase over and over. "We can't see the shore anymore," even though the coordinates placed the signal far beyond any visible land. And as suddenly as it began, the transmission cut off, leaving behind a dead channel and a crew too shaken to continue fishing that night. As part 2 unfolds, the ocean transforms from a physical threat into a psychological maze, where fog becomes walls, silence becomes pressure, and every flicker of light on the horizon could be a reflection or a warning. And fishermen describe phantom harbors, appearing in the distance, lines of lights, arranged like docks or coastal towns, promising safety, rest, and landfall, only for those lights to dissolve as boats draw closer, revealing nothing but open sea, a phenomenon that has led some crews dangerously off course, chasing something that was never there. Scientists may attribute these sightings to atmospheric conditions or visual illusions, but fishermen who've witnessed them insist there was structure, depth, intention, and the fear in not knowing what they set, in knowing they saw something. Something convincing enough to override instinct and experience. And when these encounters end, they don't leave scars on the hull, they leave scars in the mind, manifesting as sleepless nights, hypervigilance, and an unshakable feeling that the ocean sometimes reflects back things we are not meant to understand. As this chapter closes, the narration slows. The visuals linger on dark, empty water, illuminated only by a single deck light. And the voice reminds us that for every ghost ship seen, there are dozens, more rumored, unreported, laughed off at docks, because admitting the truth would mean accepting that the sea does not merely hide. Dangers creates them. And before fading to black, the narrator leaves the audience with a chilling transition. If ships can appear without crews, and voices can cry for help from nowhere, what happens when the ocean itself decides to reach back, setting the stage for part 3, where fishermen come face to face, not with illusions or echoes, but with forces beneath the surface, powerful enough to remind humanity it is not in control. Followed by a soft, encouraging viewers to stay subscribed to True Terrorfiles Official. Because the final chapter dives deeper than radar, deeper than light, and closer to the point of no return. There is a moment every fisherman who survives the deep remembers clearly, not because of what they saw, but because of what they felt. The instant when the ocean stopped behaving like water and began behaving like something. Aware, and this final chapter brings us to that edge, where real fishermen describe encounters that stripped them of certainty and replaced it with a fear so profound it followed them back to land. Because beyond phantom ships and impossible radio calls lies something even harder to explain. The overwhelming force from below, the unseen presence that doesn't need to show itself to make its dominance known. Like the long-line crew operating miles offshore, who felt their vessel jerk violently backward as if snagged on the seafloor, even though their charts showed nothing but open depth beneath them. And as the engine roared against the pull, the deck vibrated, not in the chaotic way of waves or current, but in a steady, relentless drag, something holding on, forcing the captain to make a decision no one wants to make: cut the line or risk capsizing. And when the line was finally severed, it didn't snap back as expected. It sank slowly, deliberately, as though being reeled in from the other side, leaving the crew in stunned silence, staring into black water that offered no explanation. Other fishermen speak of bioluminescent disturbances beneath their boats. Not the soft glow of plankton, but large, coordinated movements of light circling just out of reach. Shapes too big to identify, moving with purpose rather than drift. And when spotlights were turned on, the lights below didn't scatter as nature would suggest. They retreated downward, vanishing into the deep with a speed that suggested intelligence, not instinct. And these moments shatter the comforting illusion that humans sit atop the food chain, replacing it with a quiet understanding that something far older and far better adapted may still dominate those depths. The terror doesn't end when the boat returns to shore, because many of these fishermen report lingering effects, nightmares of being pulled under, an inability to sleep without the sound of waves triggering anxiety, and a compulsive need to check horizons even on land, scanning for movement that shouldn't be there. And perhaps most chilling are the stories of those who tried to return to sea, only to freeze the moment darkness fell, bodies responding, before their minds could, heart rate spiking, hands shaking as if some primal warning had been permanently engraved into them. These experiences rarely make official reports, because how do you document something you never truly saw? Something that left no physical trace except fear. And so the stories survive in fragments, passed between crews, shared quietly at docks just before dawn, often prefaced with, "I've never told anyone this." And as the narration slows, the visuals pull back to show the endless scale of the ocean at night. A reminder that humanity has explored more of space than the waters beneath our boats, and that the deep remains one of the last true unknowns on Earth. In this final moment, the narrator doesn't claim monsters or certainty, only reality that fishermen across the world share eerily similar accounts, despite never meeting, never comparing notes, and never benefiting from exaggeration. And that consistency is what unsettles the most, because it suggests pattern, and patterns suggest presence. As the video draws to a close, the voice lowers and offers a final warning, rather than a conclusion. The ocean doesn't need to reveal its secrets to be feared. It only needs to remind us how small we are, before gently inviting viewers to reflect, asking them to share any unexplained maritime experiences they've heard or lived through in the comments, and in encouraging viewers to subscribe to True Terror Files Official for more true and atmospheric horror stories rooted in real encounters. As the screen fades to black, and the sound of distant waves continues just long enough to make the silence feel heavy, unresolved, and deeply unsettling.